There are moments in life when the psyche whispers, "This is not for you." And then there are moments when it does not whisper, but screams, with the full force of your intuition, your memory, and the quiet voice of your unlived soul. Today I want to speak to that sacred part of you that still listens, your deep self, your knowing self, the part that remembers who you were before the world taught you to ignore your own instincts. There is a peculiar and powerful thing about words. They carry within them the residue of the soul that speaks them. They are never just sounds but mirrors of the unconscious. When a man speaks, he is not only communicating, he is revealing. The psyche leaks through the cracks of casual speech, and in these revelations, the truth about his character, his wounds, and his intentions begin to shimmer into view. If we are attentive, if we listen not just with our ears, but with the soul's deep intuitive perception, we can discern what lies beneath the surface. A man may not raise his hand. He may not shout or threaten, but he may speak in such a way that your spirit begins to recoil, quietly, instinctively, as though it has seen a storm long before it touches the land. These are the moments that many brush off, moments we dismiss, as bad moods or just the way he is. Yet these are the sacred warning bells. The subtle flicker of unease when a seemingly innocent phrase hits your chest like a stone. That is your inner wisdom speaking. That is your ancient self. The self untouched by culture or compromise alerting you, this is not love. This is a signal. As a man trained in psychology and profoundly drawn to the mysteries of the unconscious, I have come to understand that what is unspoken often shapes us more than what is said. But when speech does arise from the shadow, it betrays something potent. Words like poison-tipped arrows wrapped in silk. They may not wound the body, but they puncture the soul, and they accumulate in the psyche like sediment. Over time, a woman who tolerates such speech will find herself shrinking, doubting, second-guessing her own worth. And so I say, let us honor the sacred task of listening deeply, not only to what is said, but to the energy beneath it. Let us not excuse dismissiveness, manipulation, or condescension simply because it does not come with violence. Let us have the courage to treat certain words as the omens they are. For language is the architecture of relationship, and when it is built on control or contempt, it cannot house your spirit. You must become fluent in the language of your own knowing. In a world that teaches you to rationalize your discomfort, to explain away your pain in the name of loyalty or fear of being alone, you must instead become loyal to your soul. Words are never just words, they are spells. And some of them are meant to bind you, not love you. Recognizing them is not paranoia. It is self-respect in its highest, most intuitive form. You're too sensitive. It sounds almost harmless, softly, spoken, maybe even with a half smile. But buried in this phrase is a deep dismissal of the soul's most sacred compass, feeling. Sensitivity, in its truest form, is not fragility. It is perception sharpened by presence. It is the ability to feel the subtle, to intuit the unseen, to be moved by nuance. And yet when a man utters these words, he is not merely describing your emotional range. He is condemning it, reducing it, and turning it into a flaw. What he really means is, your truth makes me uncomfortable. Your emotions challenge my control. This is how the subtle erosion of self begins. Not through outright abuse, but through the slow drip of doubt cast upon your most natural responses. You express pain, and instead of compassion, you receive critique. You voice a boundary, and it is interpreted as weakness. Over time, this conditioning teaches you to distrust your own body's signals, to silence your tears, to smother your instincts, to question your reality. In the language of depth psychology, this is a projection of the man's shadow. He cannot face his own discomfort, so he offloads it onto you. He cannot hold emotional depth within himself, so he labels yours as excessive. Your sensitivity becomes a mirror he cannot bear to look into, because it reveals everything he has, avoided within himself, his wounds, his fears, his suppressed grief. When I worked with women who had heard this phrase again and again, I often saw the same pattern. They had learned to apologize for their inner world, to edit themselves, to shrink their emotional truth to fit the fragile egos of men who had never learned how to hold space. But sensitivity is not something to outgrow or mute. It is the soul's intelligence. It is what allows you to navigate the world with depth, empathy, and grace. It is a sacred gift, not a burden. To be told you are too sensitive is to be told in essence that your experience is invalid. And this, repeated over time, creates a fracture between your inner truth and your outer expression. You begin to betray yourself in small ways at first, swallowing words, staying silent, smiling when your heart is breaking. Eventually, you forget how to listen to yourself at all. But the truth is, there is no such thing as being too sensitive. There is only being misseen, misheard, and misvalued by someone unequipped to meet you where you are. So if a man says this to you, understand. He is not commenting on your nature. He is revealing his own limitations. And the cost of continuing to make yourself smaller for someone who cannot meet you, is far too high. You deserve to be with someone who sees your sensitivity not as something to be managed, but as something to be cherished, because it is the very language of your soul. You're lucky I put up with you. At first, it may strike the ear like a joke, a throwaway line meant to tease or provoke a reaction. But listen carefully. Beneath its thin veil of humor lies something far more corrosive, a quiet campaign to redefine your worth. This phrase is not love speaking. It is resentment masked as tolerance. It implies that your presence is burdensome, you're being a task to endure, and that somehow by staying he is doing you a favor. This is not the language of intimacy. It is the language of domination. It is the subtle weapon of one who wishes to invert the truth and place himself on a pedestal built from your insecurities. In saying, "You're lucky I put up with you," he positions himself as the generous one, the saint who tolerates your perceived flaws. But what he is really saying is, "I believe I am better than you, and you should be grateful I haven't left." It is emotional manipulation, calibrated to chip away at your self-worth until you begin to question your own right to expect tenderness, support, or understanding. Over time, this phrase does its quiet damage. It becomes a lens through which you start to view yourself, not as someone deserving of love, but as someone barely tolerable, perpetually on trial. You become cautious, overly self-aware, careful not to rock the boat. You learn to anticipate moods, to tiptoe around silences, to brace yourself for emotional withdrawal. The relationship becomes less about connection and more about survival, appeasing, pleasing, enduring. But love, real love, does not speak in hierarchies. It does not count sacrifices or keep score of faults. It does not tolerate the other. It honors them. A man who genuinely loves you will never frame his affection as a burden. He will not imply that you are lucky to have him. Rather, he will see your presence in his life as a blessing, not a chore. He will recognize that both of you are imperfect, growing, evolving, and that true connection lies not in judgment, but in mutual respect and humility. To accept this kind of phrase is to internalize a lie, that you are somehow less than, always, needing to earn your place. And once you believe this lie, it becomes easy to stay in situations that diminish you, to mistake cruelty for honesty, and to lose the clarity that says, you are already enough. If a man speaks this way to you, it is not a reflection of your inadequacy. It is a reflection of his own emotional immaturity and unresolved wounds. He seeks to control the narrative by controlling your self-image. But your spirit knows better. Your soul was not born to be tolerated. It was born to be met, in its fullness, with reverence. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise. Don't tell anyone what happened. These words, though seemingly innocent in their intent, are a veil over something far darker. They suggest secrecy, silence, and the quiet manipulation of your voice. In this simple directive, there is an implicit demand. Keep this between us, where no one else can see. And with that, a small but potent form of control is established. This is not protection, it is oppression. This is not trust, it is secrecy born of shame. When a man says, "Don't tell anyone what happened," He is often signaling the need for control, for isolation, for the creation of an emotional cocoon where only he holds the power to define the relationship, the truth, and the narrative. It is an invitation to hide the shadows of what truly transpired, to place the truth behind a curtain, where it cannot be exposed or questioned. And in doing so, he isolates you from the world, turning you inward, forcing you to doubt your own experiences. This phrase acts like an anchor, pulling you into the depths of silence away from the healing power of shared truth and community. The significance of this is profound. When we do not speak our truth, when we are coerced into hiding the things that wound us, we allow the wound to fester in darkness. We allow the lie to take root, grow stronger, and infect the psyche. And as this secrecy deepens, it erodes not only our sense of safety, but our sense of self. We begin to question what is real and what is not. We begin to believe that we must bear our pain alone, that we are somehow unworthy of support, understanding, or validation from others. This is not love. This is manipulation disguised as protection. The truth, after all, needs no protection. It needs expression. Our stories are not burdens to bear in isolation, but pieces of our essence that seek to be witnessed and understood. And yet, when a man asks you to hide the truth, to keep it locked within, he is asking you to dishonor yourself. He is teaching you to silence the most authentic parts of you, the parts that need love, the parts that need validation, the parts that need to heal. I have seen many women who have held the secrets of their relationships close to their hearts, bearing their emotional scars in silence because they were told not to speak of the pain. They were taught to protect the man's image, his pride, his reputation, at the cost of their own soul's peace. They believed the myth that silence equals safety, that if they only held things in, they could prevent chaos, avoid judgment, or preserve the relationship. But what they ultimately found was that the silence was a prison and the truth was a flame they were never allowed to let burn. We must understand this. When you are silenced, you are not being protected. You are being suppressed. When you are asked to conceal the truth, you are being kept in a psychological cage where your authenticity is the price of staying. And to stay in such a place is to abandon your own sovereignty, to submit to a narrative not of your own making, but of someone else's choosing. So listen closely when the words, "Don't tell anyone what happened," are spoken. Recognize them not as a call for privacy, but as a warning signal, a red flag that demands your immediate attention. No relationship that thrives on secrecy can be built on trust, and no love that flourishes in silence can offer you the freedom to be your truest self. The truth cannot be contained. It cannot be buried. It will rise again, and it will do so in a form that may break your heart, but will ultimately set you free. You'll never find someone like me. On the surface, it may sound like a bold declaration of uniqueness, perhaps even a compliment to oneself. But peel back the bravado, and you'll find something far more sinister, a veiled threat wrapped in the language of scarcity. This statement, when uttered not with humility but with arrogance, is not about love or admiration. It is about fear. It is about planting a seed of doubt so deep in your psyche that you begin to question your own ability to choose, to leave, to be whole without him. This phrase is the anthem of the insecure ego, the man who knows, perhaps unconsciously, that his hold over you is fragile. It is his attempt to reassert control not through violence, not even through argument, but through the insidious suggestion that he is irreplaceable, that your happiness is tethered to his existence, and that your world will shrink without his presence. What he's really saying is, you won't survive without me. And that is not love. That is psychological bondage. There is an irony in the phrase, of course. Yes, you will never find someone exactly like him, and thank the heavens for that. Because what he's implying is not that he is rare in kindness or generosity or emotional depth. He is suggesting that his power over you is irreplaceable, that his approval, his attention, his affection, often given conditionally, are things you cannot live without. But what he is truly revealing is his own dependency on your diminished sense of self. His sense of superiority depends on your uncertainty. Over time, if you believe this story, you begin to feel that leaving him would be not only a loss, but a devastation. You begin to hold on to his memory not because it nourished you, but because it defined you. You recall his words, his presence, the way he once made you feel seen, and yet forget how often he made you feel small. You may find yourself in moments of silence wondering if he was right, wondering if this really is the best you'll ever have. But that thought, that doubt, is not your intuition. It is the residue of manipulation. This phrase is not an expression of confidence. It is a confession of his inability to love you in a way that allows your freedom. The truly secure, soulful man does not need to convince you of his irreplaceability. He trusts that love, when real, does not require such threats. He would never try to anchor your future in fear. He would never try to frighten you into staying. When someone tells you, "You'll never find someone like me," know this. They are not offering you truth, they are offering you a trap. Because the deepest truth is that no one is irreplaceable in the way they want you to believe. The universe is not that stingy. Life is not that limited. You are not confined to one love, one path, one chapter. There are people, many people, who will see you, love you, respect you without needing to control you. People who will never make your fear the currency of your connection. To walk away from someone who speaks these words is not a sign of failure. It is a declaration of self-worth. It is the moment your soul steps forward and says, "Yes, I will find someone like you. Only better. Someone who doesn't need to say it, because he shows it. I guess I'm just a terrible person then." This phrase may arrive in a moment of conflict, perhaps after you've expressed your hurt, your needs, or your boundaries. It sounds like an admission of guilt, but in truth, it's a cunning form of emotional reversal. What masquerades as self-deprecation is in reality manipulation, an attempt to shift the focus from your pain to his wounded pride. It is a performance, a retreat into victimhood designed to silence your truth. At its core, this is not a true reckoning with responsibility. It is a defensive mechanism of the ego, the shadow self recoiling from accountability. Rather than sitting in the discomfort of your experience, rather than facing the impact of his actions, he wraps himself in the armor of martyrdom. He frames your expression of pain as an attack, and in doing so, forces you to comfort him, to reassure him, to clean up the emotional mess he created. Suddenly, your wound is no longer the center of the conversation. His feelings are. This is psychological inversion. Subtle, yet deeply effective. It teaches you, slowly and implicitly, that bringing up your needs will only lead to drama, guilt, or withdrawal. You begin to weigh your truth against the emotional fallout it may cause. You start to doubt whether your pain is even valid, because every time you bring it up, it seems to crush him. And if he's just a terrible person, then any further confrontation becomes cruelty on your part, no matter how gently or honestly you speak. What happens next is silence. You begin to swallow your truth. You cushion your boundaries. You learn to carry your hurt quietly, believing that to speak it is to harm the fragile house of glass he has built around himself. This is not intimacy. This is not accountability. This is emotional evasion disguised as humility. And yet this tactic is not always consciously malicious. Often it is the language of a man who never learned how to hold his own darkness. It is the voice of someone who cannot bear to feel flawed, so he turns any criticism into a self-fulfilling prophecy. But understanding this does not mean you must excuse it. Empathy does not require endurance of harm. Compassion does not mean abandoning your own emotional integrity. You must recognize this phrase for what it is: a refusal to grow. A refusal to meet you in the sacred space of mutual accountability. A relationship can only thrive when both people are willing to confront discomfort, to own their actions, and to respond not with self-pity, but with curiosity and care. When a man says, "I guess I'm just a terrible person," he is not confessing. He is deflecting, and you are not required to rescue him from the consequences of his own behavior. You are not cruel for asking for more. You are not selfish for needing your truth to be heard without it being twisted into a pity play. Real love does not hide in self-loathing. It rises through vulnerability, accountability, and the willingness to change. If your voice keeps being met with guilt-tripping and emotional retreat, then know this. The problem is not your truth. It is his unwillingness to hear it. You're crazy. Few words cut so sharply. Few words carry such a violent undercurrent masked in casual tone. It may be said with a laugh, a roll of the eyes, or even a shake of the head. But don't be fooled. It is not a joke. It is a weapon. And like all weapons wielded in moments of vulnerability, its purpose is not to understand but to invalidate. It is meant to sever your connection to your own reality. When a man utters this phrase, especially in response to your truth, your intuition, your emotional response, your sense of something being wrong, he is not engaging in dialogue. He is rewriting the script, discrediting you at the root of your being. He is planting seeds of doubt where clarity once lived. What he really means is, your feelings challenge my comfort. Your insight disrupts my control. Your knowing is dangerous to the illusion I need to maintain. This is not merely about disagreement. Disagreement is natural, even healthy. This is something deeper, something far more corrosive: gaslighting. It is the attempt to bend your perception so thoroughly that you begin to lose trust in your own thoughts, your own memories, your own emotional compass. It's as if suddenly, the solid ground beneath your feet becomes a shifting tide, and no matter how firmly you stand, you feel off balance, uncertain, even about what is true. Over time, "you're crazy" becomes a mantra you internalize. You start second-guessing your reactions. You begin to wonder if maybe you are overreacting. You replay conversations in your head, searching for evidence to support your own feelings. And eventually, the more you suppress your instincts to maintain peace, the more disconnected you become from yourself. This tactic is especially cruel because it strikes at the soul's most sacred faculty: intuition. Jung taught that the unconscious is always trying to bring truth to the surface, that our psyche speaks to us in dreams, emotions, and symbols. When someone tells you you're crazy for noticing something that doesn't feel right, they are not just silencing your voice, they are silencing the language of your soul. And once that connection to self is weakened, it becomes easier to control you. Easier to keep you small. Easier to keep you dependent on their version of reality. That's what makes this phrase so powerful and so dangerous. It is an attempt not just to win an argument, but to colonize your mind. But your inner knowing cannot be erased. Your psyche remembers. Your body remembers. The shiver of discomfort. When something is off, the rising tension when your truth is ignored. The quiet voice that says this isn't right. These are not signs of instability. They are signs of deep sensitivity, of clarity, of a soul unwilling to live in illusion. You are not crazy. You are waking up. You are listening to the subtle instruments of your being. And if someone fears that, mocks that, or tries to silence that, it says more about their discomfort with truth than it does about your mental state. Do not give your power away to those who cannot bear the heat of your intuition. To be called crazy for feeling deeply and knowing clearly is not an insult. It's a sign you are touching something real. And that reality, no matter how threatening it may be to others, is your compass home. I didn't mean it like that. On the surface, this phrase seems benign, even conciliatory. It wears the costume of explanation, but more often than not, it conceals something much more cunning, a subtle erasure of your emotional experience. When spoken after a hurtful comment or dismissive behavior, these words act as a broom, sweeping away the mess without ever acknowledging the stain it left behind. It's not an apology. It's a redirection. It's not accountability. It's avoidance. What this phrase does is invalidate. It says your reaction is the problem, not my words. Your pain is inconvenient, not my behavior harmful. It turns your emotional wound into an overreaction, your honesty into hypersensitivity. And slowly you begin to shrink. You hesitate before speaking, wondering if you're misinterpreting things. You start to edit yourself, walking through the minefield of their moods with careful, measured steps. But meaning is not defined solely by intention. It is defined by impact. Carl Jung taught us that what is unconscious within us will be projected outward until it is made conscious. So when someone says, "I didn't mean it like that," without pausing to explore how it was received, they are refusing to face the shadow, the part of themselves that acted carelessly, selfishly, or defensively. They are insisting their intent should be enough to dismiss your reality. But in doing so, they are rejecting the very bridge between two people. Empathy. The truth is, even if he didn't mean it like that, it landed like that. It hurt. It confused, it triggered, and if he truly cared, he would lean into that discomfort, not run from it. He would say, "I didn't realize how that came across. I'm sorry it hurt you. Tell me more so I can understand." But the man, who relies on this phrase as a shield, is not interested in your inner world. He is interested in protecting his self-image. This is where the danger lies. Over time, you may begin to betray yourself. You may stop trusting your instincts because they are so frequently questioned or dismissed. You may stop voicing your boundaries because you're tired of being made to feel like you're exaggerating. The relationship starts to feel one-sided, a place where only one person's comfort matters. But a relationship is not a court where only one narrative is allowed. It is a mirror, a dance, a dialogue. If someone consistently meets your hurt with denial cloaked in justification, you are not being loved. You are being managed. You deserve more than someone who explains away the impact of their words. You deserve someone who pauses and listens, who holds space for your experience, who says, "That wasn't my intention, but I see how it affected you, and I want to do better." That is the language of respect. That is the music of real connection. Don't let anyone train you to question your pain, to rewrite your inner truth just so they can stay comfortable. The soul grows in truth, not denial. And the moment you begin to honor your experience without needing to justify it is the moment you begin reclaiming your voice. Why are you always so emotional? These 6 words are a cage disguised as a question, a subtle, seemingly innocent inquiry that carries within it the weight of centuries of silencing. It's not curiosity that speaks here. It's condemnation. It is not a question at all, but a judgment in disguise, a dagger wrapped in a shrug. It tells you that your emotional depth, your sensitivity, your instinctive responsiveness to the world is not just inconvenient. It is too much. It is wrong. When a man says this to you, he isn't seeking understanding. He is seeking control. He is trying to move the spotlight from his behavior to your reaction. He wants to paint your natural emotional response as excessive so he doesn't have to face the discomfort of being responsible for it. Suddenly, your tears become the problem, not the betrayal that caused them. Your voice becomes too loud, not the silence that provoked it. Your truth becomes drama, not the disregard that triggered it. Carl Jung once said that emotion is the chief source of becoming conscious. Nothing happens without emotion. And yet this phrase, "Why are you always so emotional?" seeks to suppress the very thing that gives you access to your inner knowing. It is an attempt to sever you from your power, because your emotions are not weakness. They are data. They are the soul's language. They tell you when something is wrong. They tell you when something is out of alignment. They tell you what you need, what you value, and where you are not being met. But when you are told repeatedly that your emotions are too much, you begin to internalize that message. You start to monitor yourself, to dull your edges, to question your instincts. You learn to turn down the volume on your heart so someone else can stay comfortable in the silence of their own avoidance. And in doing so, you lose a part of yourself. Not because it was wrong, but because someone else refused to honor it. Emotional expression is not chaos. It is not fragility. It is aliveness. It is the divine energy moving through your nervous system, asking you to pay attention, to listen, to care, to act. And anyone who makes you feel ashamed of this aliveness does not yet know how to meet you in your fullness. If a man belittles your emotions, he is revealing his own lack of emotional fluency. He is showing you the limits of his own depth, not the limits of your value. Do not let him convince you that your passion, your tears, your anger, or your joy are burdens. They are the truth trying to surface. And that truth is not too much. That truth is your compass. It is your sacred inheritance. Let no one shame you out of it. Because when you honor your emotions, you honor your soul. And that is where your power truly lives. I don't want to talk about it. These words, often spoken with a sharp finality or a weary sigh, act as a wall, shutting down the possibility of connection, healing, and understanding. They are an evasion, a refusal to engage with the complexities and discomforts that genuine intimacy demands. When someone says this to you repeatedly, it is not simply a preference, it is a refusal to meet you where you are, to share in the vulnerability that authentic relationships require. Carl Jung emphasized the importance of shadow work, the willingness to confront the hidden, uncomfortable parts of ourselves to move toward wholeness. When a man declares, "I don't want to talk about it," he is turning his back on this vital process. He is refusing to explore the shadows that haunt the relationship, the wounds that need tending, and the misunderstandings that cry out for resolution. In doing so, he keeps the connection superficial, fragmented, and ultimately hollow. This phrase carries with it a subtle message that certain feelings, certain truths, certain pains are better left buried. It implies that emotional labor, so often unevenly distributed, is something he will not undertake. The silence that follows is not peaceful. It is heavy, oppressive, and isolating. It leaves you alone with your questions, your fears, your yearning for clarity. Repeatedly encountering this refusal can erode your sense of safety and trust. It teaches you to withhold your needs, to silence your curiosity, and to accept the relationship as a place where your voice is secondary, optional, or unwelcome. This is not love. It is a retreat into emotional self-preservation at your expense. Moreover, this unwillingness to communicate often masks deeper fears: fear of vulnerability, fear of change, fear of being truly seen and possibly rejected. But no relationship can flourish in fear. No bond can deepen without the courage to face discomfort together. If he truly cared, he would lean into the difficulty. He would recognize that the path to connection winds through the uneasy terrain of honest conversation. He would understand that silence is not a balm. It is a barrier. And he would choose to walk toward you, not away. When you hear, "I don't want to talk about it," listen not just to the words but to what lies beneath them. A choice not to engage, to protect oneself at the cost of the other, and recognize that you deserve a partner who chooses connection over avoidance, courage over retreat, and love over silence. Your voice matters. Your questions matter. Your longing for understanding matters. Do not settle for silence when you seek truth. Do not accept walls when you crave windows, because the fullness of love is found not in the absence of conflict, but in the bravery to confront it, together. As we come to the close of this reflection, let us hold fast to one enduring truth. The words we allow into our lives are not mere sounds. They are the vessels through which our souls are either nurtured or diminished. When a man speaks these 5 phrases to you, phrases that mask control, sow doubt, and erode your sense of self, know that they are not just casual remarks but signals flashing in the dark, calling you to awaken to your own worth and power. Carl Jung taught us that within each of us lies a profound capacity for self-awareness, for confronting shadows, and for reclaiming wholeness. To walk away from these words is not an act of surrender but a courageous step toward your own individuation, toward becoming the person you were always meant to be. It is a declaration that you will no longer accept diminished truth or fractured love. So listen closely to the language that surrounds your heart. Trust your intuition when it whispers that something feels wrong. Honor the sacred fire within you that longs for respect, honesty, and genuine connection. And when the time comes to say no more, say it with the fierce grace of one who knows their own value, who refuses to be diminished, and who embraces the transformative power of freedom. Walk away, not because you are weak, but because you are wise. Walk away, not because you hate, but because you love yourself enough to demand better. And in that brave act, you light the path not just for yourself, but for all who seek to be seen, heard, and truly loved.